don't know what they have to say. It makes no difference anyway, whatever it is, I'm against it. No matter what it is or who commenced it, I'm against it. Your proposition may be good, but let's have one thing understood. Whatever it is, I'm against it. And even when you've changed it or condensed it, I'm against it. I'm opposed to it. On general principles, I'm opposed to it.
This is the kind of thing that Paul warned against. Don't say that you're of Apollos. Don't say that you're of Paul. We're of Christ. But at the same time, I get what's so important for us to, I'm sorry, I can't ignore the comment. Flowers fall. We called the bouquet.
There you go. There you go. Well, if you're going to put
I haven't heard that one before.
If you're going to put a plug in for provisionism, I think that's not named after a person.
And that is what provision is all about. It's God's provision for all people. Divergent theology, I don't know who that is, but he's saying that we made their first episode. I'm curious, Divergent theology, maybe you could comment on the side chat. Are y'all Calvinists who are doing a theology podcast, or are you non-Calvinist of some sort or some breed? Forgive me if you've already told me this and I've forgotten, but there are a lot of podcasts out there, and so sometimes I forget who's who. But maybe you can introduce who you are on the side chat before we close here.
No, I like
Michael Patton
provisionism, and I actually added that to my own self-declaration. You know, I call myself an evangelical fundamentalist, Baptistic dispensationalist. I think, dispensationalist, provisionalist, compassionate Christian.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it right there. That's good. I need to write that down.
It kind of goes from general to smaller category.
Yeah, that's good. Divergent, Michael Pat, you say me, but who's me? I don't think your given name is Divergent Theology, so you have to tell me who me is. Michael Patton, I know. That would be a great podcast to listen to. So hey, we're giving a plug for. It sounds like you got a Calvinist and non-Calvinist. Now we've had Michael Patton on here before, and we will probably have him again sometime. He's a good Calvinistic guy, and he seems real reasonable. He's actually written articles confronting Calvinists on a lot of things, like calling tulip the gospel. He comes down pretty hard on Calvinists for calling tulip the gospel, and he seems to be
which is
pretty
good.
reasonable.
That's really good.
Yeah, Samson. Okay, I don't know that I've had pleasure of meeting you, Samson. So good to meet you via side chat, and good luck on the podcast. I look forward to listening to it. It sounds like Brian, you and I made their first podcast. So
wow, praise the Lord.
Maybe I'll go listen to that when I get a chance. So we'll see if you do a good job representing us with Michael Patton. So, all right. God bless, guys. I'm going to go eat. I'm hungry. So
Thanks again.
God bless, guys. Bye-bye. Be good.
I mean, if I had better lighting, I can adjust this and make it brighter, but it looks really weird.
It's fine. It's fine. As long as
Okay.
So you're over the corona now? I don't have to wear this?
Yeah. I would still be careful. We don't know enough about it. I mean, you would not want to get the stuffy nose I had. It was bad.
Yeah. All right. Well,
our whole family got it. Our entire family.
Yeah. So you got the antibodies now and everything? You guys you're invincible?
I guess. I mean, that's what they say. So we'll see. That's all I got. I mean, I got something I can throw out there afterwards if we need to do another one.
I don't think so, because we have a lot to go over, because this is going to spill into also our conception of the church.
Okay.
And just kind of that understanding. And where we kind of left off before, one thing that we were talking about,
Wait a minute, are we doing the program?
Yeah.
Are we in?
Yeah, we're in it now. We're just.
Well, hi, everybody. Golly, come on. I wanted to introduce my dog. Hey, Ollie,
all right.
wake up.
Get Ollie.
Check this out.
All right.
Everybody, you're going to, wait, I don't know if you're going to be able to see him.
Oh, I see him. Yeah.
You see him? Ollie, come here. Come on. You're supposed to be on the show. Come on. No, you are just not, you're going to be in trouble. Okay.
I'll make sure that he has
He's not in that good a mood.
a cameo there. So
Yeah. All these famous, from Camaro Theologian, because Camaro Theologian is watched worldwide by everybody. Golly, we can't. I can't even express how busy I'm with Camaro Theologian.
I bet you seem like you've been pretty busy lately,
I was just kidding about that.
dropping a lot of stuff. Well, I mean, you've been promoting
Oh
a lot
yeah,
of
I have been
blogs.
busy. It's been
You've
busy
been-
with Credo House.
Credo House has been
Credo
going
courses.
crazy. And
I
just,
mean,
yeah.
It's
it's
been,
good.
It's been good though. It's been good.
Yeah.
It's been good re-entry, and it was very encouraging because, as you probably saw in maybe an email I sent,
Yeah.
I've been very, very timid, scared, insecure, and a lot of things ever since I had that drug problem a few years ago.
Yeah.
And so, it's nice to have so many people write you back and kind of encourage you and tell you stories. I read every single one of them. And it was just great. It really was. It's the best thing I could have ever had.
Yeah, that's cool. That's awesome.
And it came after really, I'll tell you, the worst morning I ever had, the most fearful morning I ever had. I'm not going to get into it, but I was very scared. And I was like, this is the worst morning. This is where I'm directionless in so many ways, but it helped. Anyway, let's get to the topic.
All right, we can get to the topic. I mean, but
what's
what's
this program called? I can't remember.
Divergent Theology.
Divergent Theology.
That's it. Well, we're going to diverge on stuff because no matter how down you get, Michael, you always remember your baptism. Isn't that what Paul tells us?
That is it. I mean, it was like tell Timothy the same thing.
Yeah.
Remember that?
So what does that mean? That's what we're going to be talking about. What does that mean? It's going to spill over into how we understand the church. And you said something kind of shocking last time. Shocking to me, rather.
Tell me what I said. I can't even remember.
You said, I've never really looked into paediobaptism.
Yeah.
I've never really considered it. And that kind of shocked me because having studied the theology program with you, years ago and going through that, and, you did your best to kind of represent all views. And I was kind of surprised when you said that. And so I wanted to kind of delve a little bit more into.
Now, wait a minute. I don't remember saying that because I'm sitting there right now and I'm like, I have to.
Oh, you said it.
I said it. Let me think.
said
Okay. Paediobaptism. Let's think what I meant by that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It must have been. Was there a context which I would have said that in? Anyway, that doesn't matter, right? That doesn't matter for the program.
Well, because I want to kind of get into it because it does tie into the church a bit, and the topic I was talking about is is baptism really about the individual or is it more about the act of the church? So we're going to kind of work through this in understanding what do we mean within covenant theology? What do we mean within baptism? Within what is the role of the church? That type stuff. And I'm actually going to bring in a parallel of marriage. Later on to show this, how baptism is like marriage into the church. And so, when you threw that out at me, I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe we should talk about that a little bit. And one of the I'll just say this, one of the classic ways of understanding covenant theology is through circumcision, through the rite of circumcision. Right, wrong, or indifferent. That's how a lot of people explain it. And they say, in the same way.
So the subject right now is covenant theology, right? Or is this a preface to the baptism?
Well, it's a preface to the baptism because the way I understand covenant theology, baptism plays a part within that covenant understanding. This is why you really can't divorce it from the church. You can't remove it, which is something else. And some stuff I want to ask you about evangelicalism that I never really understood. And we'll get into that. But so within the covenant of circumcision, what's going on is God is making a covenant with his people through circumcision, and he's actually making that covenant individually as well as corporately. Yeah. Now, circumcision we know is done with infants. Okay, so the question of can God make a covenant with infants is, completely off the table now because it's obvious. Yes, he does. But here's something that I wanted to kind of ask, just to kind of, I want to see where you're at. I want to see where the evangelical church is. I think that you're a good representative of, the evangelical church.
Well, I diverge a bit. We wouldn't diverge in theology if I didn't. But I'm going to diverge on this one. But
I was a member of an evangelical church for 10 years. And what I noticed is that baptism was like the sacred cow of evangelicalism. It was to the point where it was only adult baptism, only, Credo Baptists. And it was, besides marriage, actually, marriage was the other one, but it was the one thing that you didn't mess with and that you didn't really discuss in the church, to the point where I remember somebody wanting to be baptized, and he was actually having marital problems at the time. Him and his wife were fighting over things, and he was really struggling with a personal sin that was going on in it. And the pastor refused to baptize him because he said, "I'm not going to make a mockery out of baptism."
Yeah.
And I thought that was really, really strange to deny someone baptism because they were actually openly confessing to their pastor, "I'm struggling with a sin."
Yeah.
Now, if he would have just shut his mouth, if he would have never made it known, if he would have never sought help, if he would have never, sought the family of the church out to help him, they would have baptized him.
Yeah.
And so in the world of evangelicalism why is baptism so guarded that it's almost like a preparationism needs to come first before?
Well, sometimes I feel like this. I feel like it's guarded. Yes, it's guarded in our non-discussion of, like you said, of any other options, because I think most people are blindly committed to it, and haven't really looked at why you baptize. I guess it makes sense to them first, but they never really get presented with the historical view, the paleo-baptism view. And so they come from a Baptist tradition. You've got, so many Bible churches extending from this tradition as well. And they're all Paleo-Baptist, and that's where evangelicalism is found so much, because it created the fundamentalist church, which spilled into the evangelical church, and then all of a sudden it just kind of took over a lot of different, in the 18th century, 19th century, so many different denominations, and it has been something that has been assumed by evangelicals. And so I don't know exactly why the evangelicals would hold it so sacred, because and here's the thing that would confuse me, is most of the times I was the head of baptism at Stonebriar Community Church. And so I was responsible for doing all the baptisms, teaching all the baptisms, and I had to ask all the questions, what age do we do it? What are the parameters and all that kind of stuff. At Stonebriar, it was a little bit different because Chuck can be very gracious on certain things, and kind of Chuck Swindoll, that was our head pastor, and he can be very gracious on things, and he just kind of re-asked the question himself. What do you think? And let's study it together, and let's start anew, and let's figure this out. And so that was really kind of cool, of course, to be able to do that and to kind of start it from scratch with 20 different pastors contributing their thoughts, and that's where we were at. And so whenever I was going through it and doing this, and I was studying myself, I was like, gosh, I never knew this stuff. I never knew any of this stuff. I don't know that we really know in the evangelical church what our baptism is about. So it's sacred.
Did you ever talk about Conrad Grebel?
Well, I've talked about him before in history and his. Within that conversation, because that was a real odd way of the Anabaptist movement started, in the way that he baptized. Yeah, I don't know the way he baptized. Tell me about it.
He sprinkled. That's what was really weird about it. I'd have to grab the book on my shelf to find out the name, but a priest came to him who wanted to go with the Anabaptist movement, and they were breaking off from Zwingli because they didn't think Zwingli was going far enough. And the priest asked Conrad Grebel to rebaptize him. And they went to the fountain in the middle of town, and Grebel baptized him by sprinkling, because it was more about the rebaptizing than the mode or the method. That seemed to come along a little bit later. But there's this real big disconnect between what the church was doing, not only at that time, but even historically. Because when you say, historically, when you go back, really, paleo and believer's baptism, sprinkling and immersion are constant through the entire history of the church. It's not like one came first and then there was another. It's like they both came up together, but we just tend to emphasize what makes us look good. So, but I know that a lot of the Anabaptist traditions and the Baptist traditions came out of what Conrad Grebel did. And it was just so kind of murky on exactly why. It seemed more of a rebellious thing than an actual like bringing in or any type of covenant or any type of like meaning besides defiance.
Yeah.
And so that's why I was wondering if when you were talking about that and talking about kind of where it started and what it means, how did we get to the point where, it kind of is like the sacred cow in the way that and I'm sorry, I don't mean to call it that. That sounds very rude, for me to say.
I don't think I don't think most Baptists would care. Evangelical Baptists would care you calling it that,
let's just say that more they look at it more of a top shelf ordinance. Let me say it like that. Yeah. Rather than a sacred cow, because that's just negative with it. Yeah. But a very top shelf ordinance, that this is something that is very, very special because it is so tied in to salvation.
Yeah.
And even if it's not like something that, justifies you or anything like that, it's that confession. It's that.
Well, I mean,
that realization.
Isn't it special? I mean, why is it not that special? Why is it not a special ordinance? I mean, we don't have many ordinances, so we can make them all special, can't we?
Well, but you don't do the same thing with communion. So, for example, anybody, regardless of their stance or their sin or anything like, I've never heard of anybody in an evangelical church being denied communion.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that, but I have heard people being denied baptism.
Yeah.
Oh, hey there, everyone. Did you know that it has not been scientifically proven that you become closer to God by listening to these podcasts or watching these videos? That's right, science has nothing to do with this, but you are increasing your knowledge about God. Hopefully you are engaging your brain with us and thinking, I disagree with these guys, or I really like what they're saying. Either way, continue to listen and continue to watch and really stretch your mind, engage your mind for Christ. That's what we're called to do as Christians. You can check out our websites at thetheologypit.com or credohouse.org, and you can get tons of great merchandise like this. Now, buying these mugs and t-shirts is not going to keep you out of purgatory, but, do you really want to take that chance? I sure don't. Oh, it's good theology right there. Yeah. And so, and that's why I would say that baptism's top shelf, and marriage is with it too. I mean, marriage should be another ordinance because the way they treat it, there are people that they say, if you, before you're married, are living with your fiance, they won't marry you. Yeah. And I'm like, are you serious? You think that they're living in sin, and you can actually stop that by marrying them, but you refuse to do so. So it's like, so when I say top shelf, I really mean that baptism, I think, is like the highest, the way that it's viewed is higher than the other ordinances.
Well, didn't we talk last time about baptism and about, the possibility of doing it other ways besides even using water?
Yeah.
And even using this. I mean, it's something that's definitely worth exploring. I mean, all of the ordinances, and when you say the word ordinance, what do we hear by that? We hear 2. That's it. We have the number 2, and that's it. And we say that's all there can be. You say, well, why? And we say because. That's our best answer we're gonna have, is because. Most of the time, I'm not saying all the time. There's a lot of evangelicals who can defend this very good. I don't mean to act like nobody knows what they're talking about with this, but generally speaking, I see people just not knowing really what anything means, except for in the Baptist church. I teach at a kind of because the Church of Christ has moved a lot more evangelical in the last 20 years, 20 years alone, but they're becoming more evangelical. But I've been in those situations, and I teach regularly actually at Church of Christ on Wednesday nights, or I have been in the past, but it stopped a few months ago. But and we have talked about this, and I see that kind of their devotion to baptism, and that you don't touch that as well. But the Baptist church is the primary one. I think you're probably talking about. Bible churches don't really see it quite so much of a sacred cow, or however you want to put it. It's something that can be very much forgotten about.
My experience about people being denied was from an evangelical free church.
Yeah.
Not a Baptist church.
Well, evangelical free. I think if you're evangelical free, you are going to be in a. The thing about evangelical free is if you're in it, you probably know why you're in it. You know what I mean? It's not something that's really that much that people understand. Everybody's going to ask what that means. Nobody's going to ask what Baptist means. Nobody's going to ask what Presbyterian means. You find an evangelical free church where you're like, what does that mean? And then you really think through things in a different way. And so that's what I found, at least with evangelical free. And therefore, maybe those types of things do become.
Well, see, the thing is I mean, because I was part of an evangelical free church for 10 years. It's where I started teaching a theology program and doing all that.
What is the theology program?
What's that?
Theology program. Just write down the word theology program to remember me on screen whenever I'm rewatching this, to go check out the website at credohouse.org.
All right. Hey, if you want to do a commercial now, go ahead and shoot it. You can do it right now. I'll splice it in.
All right. I'm not prepared for a commercial.
But the thing about it was that they didn't major in the minors. Like, that was really their big thing. So you could be a Calvinist there. You could be an Arminian there. You could be a dispensationalist. You could be a covenantalist. Like, they didn't, they were like, look, as long as you agree with our statements.
But they majored in that, huh?
Yes, they did. And that was the thing, because I asked them, because when I was there, they wouldn't baptize my children. Was
it an evangelical free thing or your particular church thing?
It was, you know what? I couldn't tell you. I would, because the statement of faith was,
remember, Chuck was evangelical free for 20 years before he came to Frisco.
Okay. Well, this is from the Evangelical Free Church of America. So we would have to look up, exactly what they say, but I'm pretty sure that their statement of faith came directly from that. But I remember when I had my kids and they were young, and I asked the one pastor if he would baptize them, because I was a Paleo Baptist, and he squirmed and squirmed and squirmed, because he knew me theologically. He knows that I'm not coming in this lightly. I don't know what I'm not talking about. Like, it was, one of those things, and he was just having a difficult time with it. And I said, you know what? I know that even if we did, we wouldn't be allowed to do it here. And so I asked a friend of mine who's a Lutheran pastor, and so I had my children baptized as a Lutheran. Now they have a little L tattooed in their eye, and they can never get away from stuff. That's why. Oh, hey, it's going dark.
Did I lose some light?
Yeah, you lost some. There you go.
There we go.
But and that's why Reformation Sunday is always very important to us, because that's when they were baptized also. But so this whole thing with being an evangelical free church, and just how open it was, and how, they were okay with pretty much everything except for baptism.
Now, you're saying, whatever you say okay with, though, are you saying that they're open to other views and people being able to believe other things, but why, specifically with the practice of baptism, they're not open to other views?
Yeah.
Well, you got to understand. Let me make an argument for you.
Okay, sure.
You got to understand, it's a practice.
Yeah.
I mean, here's what you could do. You could say, we're open to people speaking in tongues, but I personally don't,
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore we're going to have the congregation go this way. And then somebody comes up and says, hey, while you're preaching, I got a message, I think, from God, and can I do that? Well, while he's open to it, he's got kind of a system, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
a system that's going. That may be some of it, but with baptism, I mean, you could make allowances, as long as your church did not hold to one or the other. If you say in our doctrinal statement, we're going to have nothing about baptism, and I don't know whether your church did or not, then yes, you need to have that allowance of paleo baptism. But if you say in your church statement, and our, evangelical free, they probably have some type of general church statement that they will use, and I imagine it has baptism in it. Now, our church did, and every church that I've been to has. That's evangelical. And now, whenever I look at the ones that you say that are open, gosh, I haven't really been to that many that are open.
Yeah, well, it's been
open on anything. I mean, Sam, I'm not just talking about baptism. Okay. They're just. I've been to a lot of hardline churches, except for Stonebriar. Stonebriar was great. I mean, we were open, but we weren't open to baptism. You couldn't baptize. You couldn't speak in tongues. You couldn't, do. Well, that's. I don't want to. That'd be a straw man. I almost said you can't do gay marriage, but that'd be no. Yeah. I don't mean that. I mean, it's just the things that are optional. Whenever they're in practice, you don't really find them available in church.
Yeah, and see, this is like a dozen years ago that I'm talking about, because this church has seemed to move on to where, like, they changed their name. They're going more emergent. If emergent church is still a thing, but they're trying to capture it, they're trying to go that mega church, that big, you know, and everything like that. And so I think that, you know, evangelical free is becoming a tagline in their name, and that may disappear at some point. I know that a lot of the pastors have left and stuff like that, but anyways, that just really, it's just so interesting how much emphasis was just put on something that they say really isn't that important. And here's another thing. Here's something else that's kind of weird. Churches that do hold that the waters of baptism, it's a sacrament, not an ordinance, that there is a dispensation of grace that you know is there, like in the Anglican Church. A friend of mine, he was just approved for ordination. He's going to be a priest, ordained as a priest pretty soon, and he's from South Carolina. And he said that the church that he was sent from to come up here to seminary, that they did baptisms in the ocean.
Yeah.
And he always asked.
I did a baptism in the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, I know. But here's the thing. But it
was cold.
But yeah,
cold.
But you do not bless the water when you do it. They do.
It was already blessed. It was already blessed. God made it.
Yeah, the water has to be blessed by a bishop. I mean, that's just part of the tradition. That's what makes holy water holy water. Well, he always asked, how far does that reach? Because are the people swimming over there? Did they just get baptized?
Yeah.
Like what, where's the magic of it? You know, sort of, I mean, and
good.
You know, and it does bring that into question, you know, what exactly is going on here? Yeah. But I don't want to say his name because he does get kind of in trouble with this. He's more Thomas Cranmer than Anglican. If you know that founding, he is much more of a receptionist when it comes to the sacraments, that it's, you know, you are receiving the grace that God has for you. As long as you're believing that you're receiving it, it doesn't matter the state of the elements or the state of the person administering it. This is between you and God. So that's more like receptionist understanding here. But it does bring up that question, like baptism and in Protestantism, it has this special place, but why? Because we fight about it like it is salvific. We really do. And we'll divide on this issue. We'll get in heated debates over it. But if you come down to brass tacks, people will say, well, it doesn't really have anything to do with, this doesn't save you. And I've been, and being Presbyterian, this puts me in a weird place because I've heard this from a lot of Presbyterian ministers and even our presbytery and our synod is not 100% clear as I would like them to be on this. And I've kind of wanted to get to the point where I wanted to ask, are we little more than Baptists that sprinkle? I mean, really, the way that we look at it, is there any type of meaning behind just an individual, you know, getting wet or doing something, or is there something else that's going on? Yeah. And I think that there's something else that's going on that is much bigger than just the individual. I think
what do you think's going on?
Well, that the church is a part of this. This is kind of what I'm getting at. That it's the church that baptized.
You think that it's a grace that's given to the church that moves into the, you know, gives people the ability to grace the baptism?
I think that it's the identifying factor of a church, that it actually is a faithful, believing church because it baptizes.
Okay, so it's the identifying fact of a local church, right? So you have to get baptized in order to belong to it, and therefore the baptism itself is for the church, not for the individual so much. You said that last time.
Yes, correct. And so what I kind of want to drive at here is,
and I like that. I do. I'm still thinking about that.
Well, because I want to drive at, like, if you ever hear of a church that doesn't baptize, they never do. It's not part of their thing.
Yeah.
Would you say, well, you question, is that a church? Hey, thanks for listening to Divergent Theology. You can visit our websites at credohouse.org or thetheologypit.com and make a donation. Support the ministry that way. Now, here's a quick look at next week's Divergent Theology.
Gosh, I mean, we're questioning everything right now with this COVID stuff, aren't we?
Yeah.
I mean, I've got so many friends and so many people who have backed out of church for so long, they're not really getting back into what they were before. They're saying, you know, I got to this place, and I started asking the question, what is church? And what does it matter, since I've started finding these other avenues? We do this online stuff. Of course, we're not